Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The sense perceptions are created in the third creation, and from these the elements are generated. The fourth creation is the creation of knowledge and of working capacity. The fifth creation is that of the controlling deities by the interaction of the mode of goodness, of which the mind is the sum total. The sixth creation is the ignorant darkness of the living entity by which the master acts as a fool. Purport. The demigods in the higher planets are called devatas or devas because they are all devotees of Lord Vishnu. Vishnu Bhakta Bhaved Deva Asurastad Viparyayaha. All the devotees of the Lord Vishnu are devas or demigods, whereas others are asuras. That is the division of the devas and the asuras. Devas are situated in the mode of goodness of material nature, whereas asuras are situated in the modes of passion or ignorance. The demigods or controlling deities are entrusted with the departmental management of the different functions of the material world. For example, of our sense organs, the eye is controlled by light. Light is distributed by the sun rays, and their controlling deity is the sun. Similarly, mind is controlled by the moon. All other senses, both for working or for acquiring knowledge, are controlled by the different demigods. The demigods are assistants of the Lord in the management of material affairs. After the creation of the demigods, all living entities are covered by darkness of ignorance. Each and every living being in the material world is conditioned by his mentality of lording over the resources of material nature. Although a living entity is the master of the material world, he is conditioned by ignorance, by the false impression of being the proprietor of material things. The energy of the Lord, called avidya, is the bewildering factor of the conditioned souls. The material nature is called avidya or ignorance, but to the devotees, but to the devotees of the Lord, engaged in pure devotional service, this energy becomes vidya or pure knowledge. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. The energy of the Lord transforms from Mahamaya to Yogamaya and appears to pure devotees in a real feature. The material nature therefore appears to function in three phases: as the creative principle of the material world, as ignorance, and as knowledge. As disclosed in the previous verse, in the third creation, the power of knowledge is also created. The conditioned souls are not originally fools, but by the influence of the avidya function of the material nature, they are made fools, and thus they are unable to utilize knowledge in the proper channel. By the influence of darkness, the conditioned soul forgets his relationship with the Supreme Lord and is overwhelmed by attachment, hatred, pride, ignorance, and false identification, the five kinds of illusion that cause the material bondage. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. So we are discussing from the 10th canto, the divisions of the creation. So in the previous verse, from the previous last three verses, the different creations, how many varieties are there, all those things are actually explained. So in the 14th verse, it mentions about there are three kinds of annihilation and about nine different kinds of creations. There are how many, total how many types of creations? Nine. Nine or 10? It is 10. There are nine different kinds of creations beside the one which naturally occurs due to the interaction of the modes. 9 plus 1. What is the meaning of besides? Besides means in addition or apart from. Just like someone says a statement, there were 5 people apart from the captain. In a team, there are 11 players apart from or besides the captain. So that means actually there are 12 members. Among the 11 are the playing ones, there is one captain. So here the word besides actually means that there are 10 varieties of creation, of which 9 are, which is mentioned here, besides the one which naturally occurs due to the interaction of the modes. So that's the 10th one which happens actually. So from the last verse, Maitreya Muni has started describing the varieties of creation, what in a systematic way, what happens first, second, third, fourth. So what is the first creation which happens? Mahat Tattva. That was the previous verse. First creation, which is actually Mahat Tattva. Then second is false ego. So from today's verse, 16th and 17th, which we are going to discuss. So Maitreya Muni is describing four next levels of creations actually. So third one is that Bhuta Sargas Tritiyastu, Tritiya. The third one is Tanmatro Dravya Shaktiman. That is, sense perceptions are created in the third creation. So first is Mahatattva, second is false ego, third is the sense perceptions. And then Chaturtha Aindriya Sargo. Yastu Gnana Kriyatmakaha. The fourth one is creation of knowledge and Gnana. Gnana means knowledge and Kriya Atmakaha, the working capacity. Kriya, Karya. So the working capacity. So the third one is sense perception and the fourth one is knowledge and working capacity. So then today's 17th verse. Vaikariko Deva Sarga. Vikara means what? Transformations or interactions. Like we know, no? The 6 kinds of vikaras, the transformations. So here it is mentioned, Vaikariko Deva Sarga. Because of the interactions of the modes of nature, Deva Sarga, the demigods or the controlling deities. Sarga means created. Panchamo yen mayam manaha. So this is the fifth creation of the demigods. Then Shashtastu Tamasas Sargo. In the sixth creation, Tamasaha, the ignorance is created. And what is the function of that ignorance? Tva abuddhi krita praboho. Praboho means master. To whom that this Prabhu is referring here actually? The living entities. Those who are in this material world, because of their conditioning of what? Conditioning of the sixth principle of creation, that is tamasaha. Because of that they start thinking, tva abuddhi kritaha. Abuddhi, their intelligence becomes covered. So that becomes ignorance. Because of the influence of the ignorance, the intelligence becomes covered. Because of that influence of the covered intelligence, they start thinking themselves as the master. So abuddhi praboho, by which then Prabhupada in the mentions that the master acts as a fool. We consider ourselves as actually master, but we are actually acting like a fool because of ignorance. So the fifth creation is that of controlling deities. That means the different administrative heads, the demigods, which happens because of the interaction of the mode of goodness. When false ego interacts with the mode of goodness, the demigods are generated. So then that's why in the purport Prabhupada actually mentions that the demigods are predominantly in Sattva Guna, goodness. Because of the false ego interaction with the mode of goodness, the demigods are generated. Whereas Asuras are the demons, non-demigods. They are predominantly in passion and ignorance because mostly they are influenced by Rajoguna or Tamoguna, the avidya potency of the Lord. The fifth creation is that of controlling deities by the interaction of the mode of goodness, of which the mind is the sum total. So the mind is considered as the sum total. The sixth creation is of ignorant darkness of the living entity by which the master acts as a fool. So in the previous verses, Maitreya Muni has described about, there are 9 plus 1 creations as well as 3 kinds of dissolutions. So after 9 creations, in a systematic way is explaining. So till this verse, the 6 types of the creations what are mentioned, actually they are created by whom? Sarga, this function is executed by whom? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. So out of the 9 creations, the first 6 are basically carried out by the Supreme Lord himself. And then using these principles, using these creations, the Brahmaji creates next 3 types of creations. That is the 7th, 8th and 9th, which is described in the upcoming verses actually. So even among the creation also we can see, when universes are created, that is created by the Lord. Then again, from each and every universe, Mahavishnu expands as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu and enters. Then Brahmaji comes. Then Brahmaji, what is Brahmaji's function basically? Among the universe, he just creates different planetary systems, creates different planetary systems, and then puts living entities in those planets according to their consciousness. So most of the work, the majority of the work is actually carried out by the Supreme Lord himself. Brahmaji is just, doing some of the secondary creation, that is the Visarga, Sarga and Visarga actually. So here, Prabhupada, in the purport, Prabhupada very elaborately mentions about, first Prabhupada explains about the demigods and the asuras. Asuras tad viparyayaha. So Prabhupada here mentions that the demigods are controlling deities are entrusted with departmental management of the different functions of the material world. For example, of our sense organs, the eye is controlled by light. Light is distributed by the sun rays, and their controlling deity is the sun. So the ability of seeing of all living entities actually is given by whom? Is coming from the sun. Then the mind is controlled by moon, the demigod moon, Soma. And all other senses, both for working or for acquiring knowledge, are controlled by the different demigods. So this how the demigods are created and different functions of our senses and their sense objects, all those things, how they are created. That's very elaborately explained in the some of the previous chapters, like third canto, fifth chapter, and third canto, sixth chapter, where how each and every demigod senses and their sense perception, and then particular function of that sense, how they are created, that is being explained. If time permits, we will come to that little later. Then, in the next paragraph, Prabhupada mentions, after the creation of the demigods, all entities are covered by darkness of ignorance. Each and every living being in the material world is conditioned by his mentality of lording over the resources of material nature. Although a living entity is the master of the material world, he is conditioned by ignorance, by the false impression of being the proprietor of material things. So Kunti Maharani, in her prayers to Lord Sri Krishna, she prays that Bhaveshmin Klishyamananam Avidya Kama Karmabihi Shravana Smaranarhani Karishyan Iti Kechana. O Supreme Lord, you mercifully appeared and propagated Shravana, Smarana, etc. Shravana means hearing, Smarana means remembering, chanting. So these principles we established so that the people, those who are engaged in avidya kama karma bihi, those who are completely deluded by this illusory potency of yours, that is avidya potency. So they can come out of that avidya potency. That's why you appeared. This is the prayer which Kunti Maharani is offering to Lord Krishna, which is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So then, avidya potency, how it actually works. Prabhupada, in one conversation, it's a morning walk conversation. So one disciple asked a question to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, how do we improve our chanting quality? This is a lengthy conversation. So that conversation, different quotes, quite often we get to hear. Like Chaitanya Prabhupada, in answer to the disciple's question, the question was that how can we make the quality the best, especially it is referring to the chanting quality, morning chanting quality. So Prabhupada answers, quality, you will understand, first of all, come to the quality. You want to understand what is quality, you should come to that quality. That means you need some preliminary foundation. No, Prabhupada is referring to quality. You will understand, first of all, come to the quality. Without having quality, how you will understand? Prabhupada is referring to different principle, that what is the basic foundation where disciple is required to understand what is actually quality chanting. So then, for Prabhupada, you follow the instruction of your spiritual master of the Shastra, then automatically you will, just like love, that is love. That is not love. When automatically you love one another, that is quality. So Prabhupada refers to Rupa Goswami's statements where, what is how can I chant with one tongue and 2 ears? If I have millions of tongues and trillions of ears, then only I will be able to chant. That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's statement. Then Prabhupada gives one practical example. Prabhupada quotes, formerly in India, in Indian societies, what used to happen? The marriages used to happen at an early age. Prabhupada quotes his own marriage. Prabhupada was married when he was, I think, 15 or 16-year-old. Prabhupada's mother-in-law, wife's mother, was married when she was 7-year-old. His father-in-law was married when he was 11-year-old. And Prabhupada's eldest sister was married even before Prabhupada was born. And second sister, when she was not getting married even after 13 years. Mother says that no, I'll commit suicide because my daughter is not getting married. How can I, accept this principle? Please get her married at the earliest. So Prabhupada is referring. So marriage used to happen at the early ages. What was the reason? And how Prabhupada connects this to the spiritual principle? It's very important, very nicely Prabhupada collects. For at least in the Indian society, at an early age, they were married. There is no quality in that quality, but gradually, remaining together, the quality of love increases. Then the wife takes care of the husband, and husband takes care, and husband reciprocates. He also takes care of that. So even this happens when they actually start living together. Even before that, there is a period when the girl, before she attains puberty, she is not allowed to stay with the husband. She stays at her father's place. So when she is at father's place, what she is being taught? You are already married, you have an husband. So occasionally that boy visits her. So then the family members teaches her that, go give him some water, give him some milk, feed him, serve him nicely. So what is that principle which parents are teaching to that young girl, a small child, female girl? They are teaching the principle of subordination. So he is the husband, you should serve. And when husband what is being taught to that boy? She is your wife. Then you should take care of her. You should protect her. You should be there in any kind of circumstances. You should stand behind her as a support. So this is the principle. So subordination. First you surrender yourself, serve him, and then you will get the result. Then Prabhupada comes to the verse which we sing every day in the Guru Puja, that Chakshudan Dilo Jai, Janme Janme Prabhu Sai, Divya Gyan Hruday Prakashito, Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite, Avidya Vinasha Jate, Vede Gai Jahara Charito. So Vedas means what? Knowledge, scriptural knowledge. So how do we, then those Vedas personified offering respect to the spiritual master. What it means actually. Why the Vedas are also offering respects. So very elaborately, it's a very lengthy conversation which happens between the disciples and Prabhupada. So there Prabhupada says that a disciple, if he becomes submissive, just like the girl, when she is at their parents' place, when husband goes, she submissively serves him. Similarly, when a disciple surrenders and submissively serves the spiritual master, then what happens next? What does spiritual master do? Prema bhakti jaha hoite avidya vinasha jate. So Prabhupada mentions, referring to this verse, that even in the material creation also, first knowledge comes and then comes ignorance. The Lord created knowledge first. The fourth principle of creation which happened is the knowledge. And then the sixth one is the ignorance. So knowledge comes first and then ignorance. It's followed by ignorance. Similarly, when a disciple becomes submissive to the spiritual master and he serves him in the form of what? By following the regulative principles, following the vidhi bhakti. Just like girl is told, you should go serve, wash his clothes, press, sometimes massage his feet or feed him, take care of him, fan him. So here that process is vidhi bhakti. Through the Vaidhi Bhakti, when we follow the instructions of the spiritual master, follow the regulative principles, then automatically what spiritual master will do? That because he is the person who is respected by even the personified Vedas. Vedas means knowledge. So he will give that Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasha Jate, by throwing away the ignorance. So Prabhupada gives another example. Suppose if this room is dark, or if this is lit now, if you switch off all the lights, what will happen? It becomes dark. So there is only one way to remove the darkness. We need not have to do anything else. Just bring light. So darkness means it's the absence of light. So absence of knowledge, absence of real knowledge, that is what is making the living entity suffer in this material world. That's what is making them, yes, Tva abuddhi krita prabhoho. The prabhus, the masters are acting like a fool. Because of what? Because of that ignorance. Because of absence of Krishna. Because of absence of the transcendental knowledge. So when we develop the transcendental knowledge, automatically it automatically the avidya potency of the Lord, which is there, which is it is dissipated, it is removed, it is thrown away. So that can happen only when a disciple surrenders, serves submissively, follows that vidhi process. Then spiritual master, when he become pleased with the service of the disciple, then he does that. So then Prabhupada further says that this is the one way how you can actually even understand what is the meaning of quality. So this quality is, what is that quality required to understand the quality of chanting? Submissiveness. Just like a wife is submissive to her husband. Then Prabhupada further quotes, that's why there was no divorces in the ancient, say about 40 or 50 years before. There was no concept of divorce. They cannot even think that I want to leave my wife, I want to leave my husband. This concept was not there at all, because this was being taught that throughout their life you have to remain together, whatever the problems are there. So Prabhupada refers to, quotes this. So avidya potency. So how we can come out of the avidya potency is to just serve the spiritual master submissively in any condition, whether in a favorable condition or unfavorable condition. So then we can actually come to that stage of understanding what is actually even quality. Otherwise, theoretically we know, but practically to understand, that has to be a spiritual master. One of the Vedic literature, it says that Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Monde Shri Guru Dheena Taranam. So even the layman can cross the mountain. The blind can start, even the person who cannot speak, he can start speaking. Layman can cross the motion because of the mercy of the Supreme Lord. So because disciple has to worship the Supreme Lord in that mood, then only he can actually come to that understanding. So how this knowledge and avidya potencies are created, that in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th chapter, again between Maitreya, conversation between Maitreya and Vidura, it is being very nicely explained that how, just like, as I mentioned in the before, that these first 6 principles for 6 types of creation, what have been done, it is done by the Supreme Lord. Next 3 are actually carried out by Brahma. So that is very much evident from the statements of Maitreya in that chapter, where he mentions that the supreme living being, in his feature as the transcendental Purusha incarnation, who is the Lord's plenary expansion, impregnates the material nature of 3 modes, and thus by the influence of the eternal time, the living entity appear. Just like this chapter also, we are seeing the interaction of the time factor. Then further, influenced by the eternal interactions of the eternal time, the Mahatattva is generated. So the same what we are seeing in a summarized form is being elaborately described in the 5th chapter. Then Mahatattva then differentiates into many different forms as the reservoirs of would-be entities. The Mahatattva is chiefly in the mode of ignorance, and it generates the false ego. That's how the second creation comes is false ego. Mahatattva is predominantly in ignorance. That's why false ego is generated. Then it's a plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead with a full consciousness of creative principles and time for fructification. So then next 3 verses, which are very important, which are very connected to the today's verses which we discussed. Mahatattva, or greater causal truth, transforms into false ego, which is manifested in 3 phases: cause, effect, and doer. All such activities are on the mental plane and are based on material elements, gross senses, and mental speculation. The false ego is represented in 3 different modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And false ego, when it interacts with each of the modes, it comes out with different another creations. The false ego is transformed into mind by the interaction of the mode of goodness, just like today in the verse we are discussing. So all the demigods who control the phenomenal world are also products of the same principle, namely the interaction of the false ego and the mode of goodness. So what is the phenomenal world? So Prabhupada, in this purport, Prabhupada mentions that false ego interacting with the different modes of material nature is the source of all material in the phenomenal world. So entire creation, the source is what? False ego. From Mahatattva, false ego comes. False ego interacts with different modes, Rajoguna, Sattva-guna, Tamo-guna. So then further comes the entire phenomenal world. So Krishna also explains this in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 7th chapter, 2nd verse, the knowledge of the absolute. So in that verse, Krishna says, Gnanam teham savignanam idam vakshami asheshataha yagnatva neha boyonyaj gnatavyam avashishyate. I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and nominal, by knowing which there shall remain nothing further to be known. So phenomenal means what? What we are actually seeing, what we can understand with our material senses. And nominal means what? Which we cannot understand from our present senses. So Krishna is saying, I'll give you that both the knowledges, for nominal and phenomenal. Prabhupada in the purport mentions, complete knowledge includes knowledge of the phenomenal world and the spirit behind it. The source of both of them is transcendental knowledge. The Lord wants to explain the above mentioned system of knowledge because Arjuna is Krishna's confidential devotee and friend. So everything is basically the source of both. For nominal and phenomenal is what? Transcendental knowledge only. That means Krishna's function as a Jnana function. Nominal and phenomenal world. Both are actually Krishna's emanating from the transcendental knowledge of Lord Shri Krishna. So that's what there it is explained actually. Further in this purport, Prabhupada mentions, the energy of the Lord is called avidya, is the bewildering factor of the conditioned souls. The material nature is called avidya or ignorance, but to the devotees of the Lord, engaged in the pure devotional service, this energy becomes vidya or pure knowledge. So, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, no, it's very, very difficult to cross the ocean of material existence. But as devotee, when you surrender to the Lord Shri Krishna, mam mivai prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. The devotee, when you surrender unto me, so then easily they can cross over. So that's what here Prabhupada is mentioning, that a devotee of the Lord engaged in pure devotional service, this energy becomes vidya or pure knowledge. Same energy. So this material nature has three functions. What are the three functions? One is that creative principle, second is ignorance, and third is knowledge. So as according to the devotee's consciousness, according to devotee's level of advancement, same material nature works in different modes, different phases. So it works as a material creative principles when at the starting of the creation. If a devotee is completely in ignorance, it acts as a maya. And if a devotee is transcendentally situated, it acts as Mahamaya or Yoga Maya, which is the knowledge potency of the Lord. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. The energy of the Lord transforms from Mahamaya to Yoga Maya and appears to pure devotee in her real feature. So Krishna also says, no, that Naham Prakasha Sarvasya Yoga Maya Samavrtaha. So Krishna is always covered by his Yoga Maya, but whereas we are covered by, unless living entities are covered in Mahamaya, we cannot see. So when we come under the influence of Yoga Maya, then we can see Krishna as he is. Then the last paragraph of the purport, Prabhupada mentions, by the influence of darkness, the conditioned soul forgets his relationship with the Supreme Lord and is overwhelmed by attachment, hatred, pride, ignorance, and false identification. So these are known as the 5 kinds of illusion. What are those? Attachment, hatred, pride, ignorance, and false identification. So the 5 kinds of illusion that causes material bondage. So because of these 5 kinds of illusion, the living entity looks like is perpetually conditioned in this material world, but perpetually bound in this material world. The same principle Krishna elaborates in Bhagavad Gita. Which chapter about illusion Krishna explains? In the 2nd chapter, Krishna explains about Thani sarvani samyamya yukta ashita matparaha vasise yasyendriyani tasya pragna pratishtitaha One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as man of steady intelligence. Stita pragna or tasya pragna pratishtitaha. Sita pragna. Next verse is Krishna is talking about a person with steady intelligence. But person without steady intelligence, what happens to them? Dhyayato vishayan pumsam sangas teshopajhayate. Sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodha bijayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachments for them. And from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. Suppose a person is walking on a street. So he come across one a shop where so very, sweet shop. So all varieties of sweets are displayed. So what happens? Dhyayato vishayan pumsa. The contemplation on the sense object starts. So which sense becomes activated? Tongue. Suppose there is a beautiful, female body, opposite sex. What happens? Our eyes becomes attracted. So there is some fragrance. The nose becomes attracted. There is some beautiful, sound. Ear becomes, attracted or activated. Activated, just like, Bakasur, who is that? Kumbhakarna. So what was the way to wake him up? They used to keep varieties of foodstuffs. So through that smell, he would wake up, or they would make, huge sound. So even the sleeping sense can be awakened with the help of the sense objects. So here that's what Krishna is saying. While contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. Then what happens? After seeing that sweet shop, okay, as devotees we say, no, we should not eat, only Krishna Prasadam. We'll remember Rajbhog plate and we'll come back. But what happens to the Karmi? What happens to a Karmi? If he has a money and if he's feeling hungry, he's dragged to that shop. He's dragged towards that sense object. Helplessly. Then, Pani Puri, yes. And from such attachment, what happens? Lust develops. What is the meaning of lust? Then next, from attachment, it turns into lust. And from lust, what happens? When that lust, because we know that in this world, whatever we desire, lust means basically desire. So when it is not satisfied, we become angry. Then, krodha. Kama krodho bijhayate. Kama means lust, the desire. So when it is not satisfied, it turns into krodha. That's what Krishna, in the 3rd chapter again, towards the end also Krishna says, when Arjuna asks, even though a person, even though he is not willing to do, but he is acting as if he is forced, what is the reason? Krishna says, Kama yesha krodha yesha rajo guna samudbhavaha. It is lust only, Arjuna, which is forcing a person to act. So that's the lust. So lust, when it is not satisfied, it turns into krodha. Kama krodha bijayate. Next verse Krishna says, Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammoha smruti vibramaha, smruti bhramshat buddhi nashat pranashyati. So then from anger, delusion arises. That's why it is said that never take decision when you are in angry mood. When your mind is agitated, when your senses are too much agitated, don't take decisions. Then corresponding to that, they also say, don't give promises when you are too happy, when you are in a very jubilant mood. Person says, no, mera aadha jajat likh ke de dunga main. Because he is very happy, but afterwards we know what happens actually. I'll give you this. Don't make promises when you are too happy, and don't make decisions when you are too disturbed, when you are disturbed by anger. So from anger, delusion arises. Why it is said? Because when a person is angry, he cannot make right decisions because he is influenced by delusion. His ability to make right decisions is covered. He fails to make right decisions. Then kamat krodhat sammoha smruti vibramaha. Then from delusion, bewilderment of memory. He cannot even think what to do. Then when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. Smruti bramshat buddhi nasho. Intelligence is lost. He cannot properly even think what is right, what is wrong. Then intelligence is lost. Then when intelligence is lost, the one falls down again into the material pool. Just like one example, a person who is too much addicted to drinking. What happens? He's like left and right up to the throat if he has drunk. He has completely lost his senses. He comes back, he fights with his wife, beats the children. Very same person, next day morning, when everything comes down, what happens? He will lament, oh my God, what did I do? Of course, after a period of time, it becomes very habitual, but at least initially, that person feels regret that what is that I am doing actually? Why did I simply beat my wife and children? For no reason. So what had happened that in the night he was failed, which was covering his intelligence because of this. His intelligence is lost and he's into the material pool. So he's just want money. He can does do anything and everything. A person can go and kill also because his intelligence is lost. His memory is bewildered. So that's what Prabhupada here in this purport mentioning that by the influence of darkness or ignorance, avidya potency, the conditioned soul forgets his relationship with the Supreme Lord and is overwhelmed by attachment, hatred, pride, ignorance, and false identification. And because of this, that causes material bondage, that makes even the so-called master of this world act as a fool. Abuddhi kritaha prabhoho. The Prabhu acts like a abuddhi kritaha, one who is not having buddhi, the buddhi nasho. Because his buddhi is his ability to understand what is right, what is wrong, is completely lost. So that's what is happening actually. We can see in this word. Person thinks he himself as a very powerful person, very great person, very beautiful person, as if it's going to be there forever actually. But they fail to understand that because they are all covered by ignorance. And only way to come out of this ignorance is what? Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme prabhu say divya gyan hriday prakashito. So that divya gyan, by the mercy of the spiritual master, he provides how he provides this mercy. Divya gyan hriday prakashito. Chakshudan dilo jai. Chakshudan. In Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya. So he opens our darkened eyes with a torchlight of ointment. Just like a blind person, after the operation, after a surgical operation, he can see after removing that some problems in retina. Similarly, we are blinded. So what does spiritual master do? Through the torchlight of knowledge, he tries to open our eyes. So then, how do we actually respond to that? By obedience, by surrendering to the spiritual master and by following his instructions. So these were the 6 types of creations which are explained by Maitreya Muni, which are actually carried out by the Supreme Lord. So in the further verses where the secondary creations, the next 3 different types of creations which are carried out by Brahma is being described in the further verses. I'll stop here. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Bol.